Dawson Rider Wiki.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here with my review of Uchu Sentai Kyuranger episode 30. So we actually had a week off last week from Superhero Time, which I did not know about. Like usually, I think it's because I've been very selective with Toku Twitter what I follow, because it's so annoying, even the news sources. But so usually I know, but I totally like spaced and didn't know that we had an off week next week, and I was actually kind of disappointed, which is like a nice change from like a year or so ago when I would see it as more of a vacation. But anyway, this was Kyuranger 37, and I thought this was a pretty solid episode, and it did some really neat things that I didn't expect. It was mainly, you know, about meeting Lucky's dad at the capital planet, or whatever you call it, the central home planet. It's like I don't remember what they called it, but the main planet of the Leo system. And, you know, we found out last week that his dad was working for Dark Matter. And the first thing I want to comment on is the most important thing, is like the most like generic king garb they dressed his dad in. Like, it was just like a generic robe and like a tiny generic crown. It's like as if they said, costume department, we needed a costume for a king. And they just Googled king, and like the first result was like a cartoon, like, chibi version of a king with the most generic costume possible. And they're like, perfect, let's do that. So that was kind of annoying. Like, it was funny, but it took you out of the moment. Like, the production values can be cheap, and you know, you can see that a lot, but in this case it was like, yeah, the king of an alien planet's totally wearing the cheapest costume available at Party City. So that was a thing. But yeah, it appeared that he was working for him. We kidnapped Lucky. Not we did, I didn't help him, but like they did. And then the others were trying to figure out what to do, and they found out that he was an imposter. And I figured that there was going to be something wrong with him. I was worried all throughout this episode that it was going to be the classic, like, either there wasn't something wrong with him or there was, and the way they got through with him was through a bunch of generic sayings. Because Lucky had already started the episode off with, like, I know you're good because dad is dad, and feelings and tokusatsu, and everyone's good, and like all this stuff that doesn't really work in real life. But it ended up not being that, because he was fully fake, and like there wasn't a way to bring him back because he's actually dead. I certainly hope they keep him dead. I hate when I always say that when a character in Toku dies, but like it seems like in the last few years they just haven't had the balls to keep the people dead. And the only reason I like it to keep them dead is because they usually serve it usually serves an important story purpose. So I think it would be really cheap if we pulled like a Doggy Kruger's wife and he was like in some sort of cage somewhere by the end of the series. But so he's actually dead and got replaced basically by a sand clone that they made. Which I also didn't expect that, because I assumed he was probably brainwashed under some sort of duress. Like either he was being threatened, or maybe he was being threatened for so long he just sort of came around to their way of thinking a bit. Or it could have been another, like, Dawn on his shoulder, but he was like a full-on sand thing. And I like that they figured that out and they came up with a plan to get rid of him and stuff. But I also like that Lucky ended up figuring out in a captivity. Like, and it wasn't for a fully dumb reason either. Like, when he was there, I mean, I guess what you can consider to be dumb. Like, the way he figured it out was that when a tear ran down his cheek and it touched him, he, like, it sizzled. But again, I was expecting the generic tokusatsu, like, I know that's not my dad because feelings and special tokusatsu feelings and friendship. But then it was just, he like literally like figured it out based on an actual like sort of investigative reason in a way. Not like he did it on purpose, but you know what I mean. Like, I like that it wasn't a Toku nonsense reason, and it was actually a smart reason that he figured out and didn't overlook. It was kind of funny that like when they said he's dead, I think he screamed out Yosha Lucky, because it was, you know, lucky that it really wasn't his dad. So that was kind of a funny moment. And then, but yeah, so I was just, the main reason I went on about that is that I thought it was going to go really cliche, and it wasn't. It was kind of a cliche story in a lot of ways, but I mean that they didn't go for the full-on Toku sentiment thing. Not that sentiment can't be bad, it just has to feel earned. So I thought they did a good job of it here. And it was a good character episode for Lucky, and it just sort of reinforced his sort of, I don't think there's ever going to be some sort of actual explanation behind that he has some sort of power that gives him luck. I think it really is, basically it's just positive thinking. Like the way they describe it in this episode is the way he's always described it, is that basically so long as he thinks the good things will happen, then good things will come his way. But I thought it was a good episode for him. Like I said, I've really been impressed with his character growth, and that's going to be something I'll probably talk about for a bit when I get to my series finale review that, or just a series overview, is that he started out as like the generic loudmouth lead red. And like gradually they've toned him down and actually turned him into a pretty well-rounded character. And like he still says his catchphrase, but it's only like glimpses of crackhead and it doesn't overwhelm it, so the character doesn't feel just like a loud catchphrase instead of a character. So I was really impressed with that, and I thought this was a good story for him. And he got like a new fancy jacket that's kind of long like Ho Soldiers, and it's got the mix of the red and white to reflect his two different suits, which I thought was cool. So yeah, it was an overall solid episode. It's kind of funny at the end, he like, you know, ends up with the crown and like ruling over the people in a way, but obviously he's not staying. He's like, oh, liberated you, and now I'm not going to be your leader, and he leaves. But I'm gonna kind of assume that in the series finale, when we get like, where's everyone now, if they do that he'll probably go back there, and that's probably where he'll like stay and like show up from like the team ups or whatever the hell happens. But yeah, overall I thought this was a pretty strong episode for Lucky. I would give it an 8. Anyway, that's about it. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. It's Awesome Rider.